Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den Podcast, your home for competitive Digimon TCG discussion and news. I'm your host Naco, joined by my co-host Zenitsu. This week, we will be discussing the recent details involving the Digimon National Finals 2023. Listen to us on your favorite podcasting networks, available now on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. Link in the description below, or find us at Wolf Den Digimon TCG.
On top of that, we also stream over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and this gets uploaded as a video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu.
For our viewer question of the week, this week's question is: what card, if you had to, would be unbanned or restricted?
Oh, that is a very loaded question. Um, oh god. If I had to pick just one, actually, let me even see what's even on the ban. Oh, I already know. Um, yeah, I'm paying
It's
attention
not
very
that
well.
long a list yet.
I know it's not. I am actually going to say like this is pretty spicy and controversial, but this also is me being a blue player, and I kind of am okay with Tommy getting off. I think Tommy is a more meta dependent type of card, whether he's actually effective or not. Plus, we have ways to protect our inheritables and different styles of play that make Tommy not necessarily super good. And that's just kind of like the same type of nature that Death Exmon is, where it's just like, okay, in go wide metas, this card is absolutely broken. But in single stack metas where you just move your stack out and potentially kill the opponent then and there, this card isn't necessarily so good. It can still be pretty powerful, don't get me wrong. Not a security if not a security Digimon and not a security option that just could remove cards from the stack is still pretty powerful, but it's not with the X antibody card. It's not as powerful because it's hitting less sources now. So again, that's just my spicy controversial pick because I have a bias towards blue, and I think Tommy can be lifted.
I feel like Tommy is one of the least controversial cards you could have said, especially in blue. But um,
Oh
I
no,
I
Ice
think
Wall needs to stay.
well, yeah, exactly. So I think Tommy is a product of Bandai not understanding the problem as well as maybe potentially acting too late because it was by their reasoning like, oh, these changes were made for the North American meta, and we're going to restrict, Jet Sylphie and Tommy. And I think that was more a concern for them, like, like back alley opinion of because the decks in Japan at the time had kind of become an amalgamation of blue flare and blue hybrid. It was like blue hybrid, blue flare decks, and I think the North American meta was going to lean more in the blue hybrid direction. So to sell their new product, they had to, cut that part off so that you were either playing blue hybrid or blue flare or nothing. And then of course everyone just played Melgax anyway and didn't need it. But um, my answer would be I think one of the more sane picks, just because it still holds a special place for me. Um, it would just be Argomon level 5. It did nothing wrong. Like it could potentially be good, but for it to be a pretty okay card, given that green has been pretty mid at best in the competitive history of the game. They were afraid of Nidhogg and hit HPD back in the day, and they restricted it like before we even got to play with it, basically, when the second set of the game came out. And then, but compared to anything that's come out recently, it's not even close of power levels, so it could probably come off the list, but I just don't even think they'd care to touch the list ever outside of adding new things when they come up.
I don't think they're gonna touch the list at all either. And I'm perfectly okay with cards staying limited to one. You could still play them. And it kind of is more just like a showpiece on like, oh, this card was hit because of well, most of their hits actually have been a trend where the Digimon that get hit are usually too efficient and do too many different things, or they're just too well, I already said too efficient, but they're too tempo efficient. Like Argamon level 5 basically digivolve for 0. That's pretty efficient. Especially in decks that now reward you for having suspended Digimon. That can be pretty crazy. And he free plays Digimon also suspended on attack, which again could also be pretty crazy. Um, and
I
then
just think that's such a minor point because it's basically Blossomon, but it has an inheritable, so it's slightly better than Blossomon. But at the same time, like you were really for there for the Digisorption level 5. You weren't really there for the inheritable as much. It was an extra little like sprinkles on top, and the fact that Blossomon is completely untouched and one gets restricted, like I feel like it wasn't that thin of a margin where Blossomon was close to getting restricted.
well, I think Blasphemon didn't get restricted partially because of the fact that they didn't print another level 5 Digisorption 3, which basically makes the evolution cost 0. So having two level 5s where you're evolving for 0, and if that's the main goal of the card, then that just puts you tempo wise potentially way farther ahead than the opponent. So, like, part of the reason why Jet Sylphie was banned was because in almost every case scenario that you're actually playing and using the card, it evolves for 1. That's still really tempo efficient compared to a lot of other level 5s, which is why I'm kind of like hoping eventually if they do decide to make a new ban list. I don't think that they're going to make one exactly for nationals per se, but we'll get into that later. But um, that's why Greymon X Antibody from BT11 kind of needs to be hit because he just makes the level 5s too tempo efficient, and that seemed to be a really big contention point and problem with the game's overall design in these stack-based decks.
I think I just the last point on the idea is that it just seems like a couple times throughout the history of the game, Bandai's had to make decisions involving ban or restrictions due to like the rules, technicalities involving certain cards. And I think, like to your point, it makes sense that Bandai didn't want there being four level fives that could digivolve for 0, using Digisorption, but also just it doesn't make sense that you can do that. So if they just change the wording, errata Digisorption to state you must have another legal target, so that because that was the big risk and fear back in the day was that you would raise a level 4 that you started with on turn 1, Digivolve for 0, turning the card sideways, and then Digivolve into a level 6 immediately. And back then, having a level 6 was kind of the only goal of any deck. And especially if it was like a Nidhogg and it was a reactive card, and I could just clear your field if you happen to hard play anything or something like that. And that's if you just fix that. Fix it so that I can't immediately raise a level 4 and just basically digivolve sideways. And Digisorption is significantly less of a problem. Maybe it's still really good now because the decks go wide enough inherently, but I don't think Argomon needs to be restricted in a world where that isn't the case.
I mean, I think if you do make that Digisorption change, then Argamon 100% can come off. Just because now, uh, like everything has a sub cost. Where it's just like DNA Digivolution. If you really break down how decks DNA, you'll hide your level 4 or level 5 one card on the field or in raising. You'll hard play the other one. That hard play is the now cost to Digivolve, even though you're going to DNA for free. So there's like a sub cost associated to it. So I think having like that sub cost definitely would make Digisorption more fair, which is why we haven't
Hmm.
seen it a whole lot. And when they did, now they stopped doing Digisorption 0, and now it's Digisorption 2 or 3 to basically make the card cost 1 to evolve, which is still really tempo efficient, which is why Bloom Hydra is just still a pretty good deck.
Yeah. I think it was just kind of an oversight on their part and how they probably regret not making that, rules distinction back in the day because they're still printing Digisorption cards every once in a while. Which is
Yeah,
actually really cool that they are still using mechanics that were printed as old as BT3,
yeah.
when normally keywords like just kind of exist and then go away to die.
Yeah, I mean, blocker still has a purpose. It's just how we utilize blocker is now different, even though we do have a redirect, which is not blocker, but pair that up with blocker, Black War, and now you get extra ways to defend against the opponent. So, like, mechanics are.
Like, this is super segue. Did you see the it was a pretty popular, but I don't read the subreddit nearly as much as I used to, but it was like kind of a big post on Reddit about how the like basically it was like an am I the asshole of my opponent asked if I had any blockers and I said no, but I had the it was
Cherrymon.
like yeah, Cherrymon that technically doesn't have the keyword blocker but is for all intents and purposes a blocker.
Oh yeah, I remember that post.
Like people were pretty heated about that because especially at like a locals level, like 100% like like you're the asshole. Like you basically withheld information that was, you know, pretty much freely available, but like had the opponent basically pried further and like, okay, let me read your card, let me pick it up and look at it, and it would have solved the disagreement or the gap in knowledge. Um, like I remember uh I was playing in like a smaller online event a while back, and I my opponent had like a memory blocker on the field, and like I crack a memory boost and put it in the trash, and then he's like, "Oh no, like I have Chumon or something," and I was like, "Oh, well," and I guess I don't, and he's like, "Oh, but you already did," and I was like, I guess yeah, you're right, like my bad, I didn't ask, like damn.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's always better to just if read the intent. Like the opponent is asking basically like it's almost just a slight change of the question. Do you have a blocker versus do you have a way to stop the attack? He was again gap in knowledge or lack in knowledge. Um, didn't realize that the new Cherrymon wasn't a blocker but could still stop the attack. So if
Hmm.
he had known that that type of ability was in the game, he might have rephrased the question differently. Um, but yeah, it's definitely interesting on how uh, phrasing and wording really does matter, and people who take advantage of it, yeah, they are kind of just frowned upon because it's like, look, you knew what he was trying to do, and you purposely misled him just to try to
Hmm.
win.
Especially at like the locals level, like
Yeah, that's not the place to do it
if
unless it's
people are still
store
playing at their
championship.
locals in 2023, like you hold on to them for dear life.
Oh my god, preaching to the choir, my guy.
Hmm.
I try to make my locals as open and inviting as I humanly possibly can because I know how important player retention is.
I mean, it's just funny because it's something I remember, but um, I think it was from a comments like it was like made on a previous episode where we were talking about the like just note, like you can only play in up to 5 store championships, and there's a hard cap of like per competitive season, and uh, somebody had said something along the lines of like, good, that makes it so that Zenitsu and all his crony friends can't just hog all the invites. Like that's what I think. That's what I imagine when I think of your locals. Like it's like a bad like '80s gang of Digimon players.
No, because there's a lot of like local dudes. I know they're like some of them are really good. Like Eli from Limit Break. I think he's literally like the team captain or something. Uh, he doesn't.
Does he get a C on his chest? He's not the captain if he doesn't have a C on his chest.
He does not have the C on his chest. You'll probably meet him at locals or not locals. Nationals.
Well, he better be wearing a jersey with a C on his chest, or he's not the captain. Just saying. That's the rule.
I don't
And
know
if he's
if
the assistant captain, he gets an A.
but I know he's a local dude, but he plays at other locals more often than my local. So, like my main local, because I'll sometimes travel to some other locals as well, but not very frequently because work and work. But yeah, so uh, finishing that segue, yeah, he kind of was in the wrong, and we need to be as welcoming and inviting to locals as best as we possibly can to foster a healthy community.
Hmm. Yeah. Especially like for the most part, those kinds of things, like even like the memory thing, like I don't know. I mean, definitely like the dick a little bit, but when it comes to like the true competitive events, I pretty hard stickler for the rules just because I'm doing my best to follow them and I expect that if I make a mistake in that regard, my opponent calls me out on it and the situation gets corrected. But um
I mean, the higher
like
up the competitive ladder, the less you kind of should be running into those situations to begin with. And if you are, they're actually going to be more intricate than do you have a blocker? Yes or no?
Mhm.
No, I don't, but I have a redirector, but I'm not going to tell you. Like,
well yeah, so I mean specifically my situation involved a an event. I geez, it was a while ago too. He was still playing Imperial Dramon. But my opponent basically was playing Imperial Dramon and must have started with a pretty bad hand and see I'm trying to remember the exact trying to remember the cards that could be played to make this make sense, but they had used a Hammer Spark without hatching their egg because they didn't have a rookie, so they didn't hatch and then tried to play a Hammer Spark to play something else. And then only afterwards did I notice, like, oh, wait, you can't play Hammer Spark. You didn't have a blue source. And, like, okay, well, now it's my turn and I've already drawn and I've already digivolved. And so, like, the situation was deemed irreparable and the opponent got a game loss for it. And I was like, man, like, kind of feel like an asshole because I was like, well, this happened. Like, I just kind of wanted him to get his card back and then me to get my memory, but that's not how that goes sometimes. So, I don't know.
yeah,
Like
I
the,
mean,
the judge ruling was a little weird because I want to say he basically just like hammer sparked and then hard played like a green rookie or something. Maybe it was BT8 and then it was like he hard played Stingmon or something.
could have been.
Like the point being is that he didn't hatch because he didn't have a rookie when it was fully within his control to hatch, and he just didn't. But then he played a card that technically gave him 0 mana, but then he gained mana for it or memory, and then I was like a couple of steps into my turn before I realized it. And I was like doing the math, and I was like, wait, how'd you play Hammer Spark? You don't have blue.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, I've done silly plays like digivolving a blue Digimon into a green Digimon with HPD when that's technically not legal. It needs to be from a green Digimon. I've definitely miscounted memory, but usually most of the time those were more repairable game states.
hmm
Um, so yeah, that sometimes unfortunate things happen due to small little oversights.
but um, speaking of irreparable situations, there's been some nationals news.
Yeah. So, if anyone is unfamiliar, Nationals is coming up on February 24th. You have to fly out to California in order to play in person. They actually made the event free. So, as long as you could get to California for the event, you didn't need to pay for a ticket to enter the event, which is
Which
pretty
makes sense.
nice.
It
Yeah,
was
it,
it was
it only
something that
makes
I had
sense.
speculated because, well, they technically by their wording they only charge for shipping previously, or giving us our prize participation pricing, what have you, and or I guess our pricing, and um, there is no cost associated with them handing me a package in person or handing me some items. So no cost to for them means no cost for me.
And based on the location of core TCG and the event, they're only 25, 30 minutes away. So it's not like it's going to be a huge travel expense for Core to go to the convention center to set everything up. So they kept it as close to Core as they humanly possibly could, probably for that reason, just because it's easier to set up. And also they haven't really done a whole lot in the west side of the country, at least for North America. Um, but the player cap is at 1,152 players. So I believe there's like, rounding up, rough estimate, 1,700 players that are able to go, that have their invites. So about like 600 people aren't actually going to be able to attend. If it caps out right now, I don't necessarily think it capped out exactly quite yet. But I also know not everyone is going to have the time and money to be able to do it. So
Hmm.
I think even though there is a cap that's lower than the amount of players playable, it's still fine.
It's pretty safe. I mean, we basically we had the same conversation, 6.5 months ago when they announced it in person, and um, because a lot of people they played at their locals and they qualified with a store champ and they were super excited, and then they found out that it was in California and they're like, I'm not gonna pay for a flight and like 3 or 4 days in a hotel to play Digimon. Like
On
I
top of
just
food
won my
expense.
locals.
Yeah, on
I
top of
wait, I
food
won my
expense.
locals. Like yeah, there's a lot of costs associated with travel, and which is a downside, but it also should hopefully make it that much more. We're not gonna have to worry about webcam shenanigans or um like people with bad internet or whatever what have you. Like it's a true blue in person competitive event with staff judges and a you know uh purchased convention hall, rented convention hall for the event. So it's a standard and as like highbrow as it comes.
Yes. And speaking of convention hall, it is going to start on Friday. That's when the doors open, but we're not actually going to be playing anything until Saturday. That's like pure day one. And on that day one, it's going to be estimated around 11 rounds. So that's
Hmm.
a lot of rounds to play.
That's a lot
Um,
of Digimon.
yeah, and the rounds are best of three, 45 minutes plus 5 minutes overtime, so about 50 minutes per round.
It's a
So
little shorter
that's,
than normal, is it not? Like five minutes shorter.
depending on the TO, yes and no. I know Carta Magica usually is 45 minutes, where Top Cut is 50. So
Everyone's
it's
favorite.
yeah, so it just depends on the TO and everything. I think because it's 11 rounds, the 5
They kind of
minutes,
had to.
yeah, the 5 minutes shorter is kind of,
It'll add up. It'll be an extra hour shorter.
uh yeah, like all that time does add up, even though they did rent out the venue, so they're not at any fear of like, oh, we need to push everyone out just because the venue is closing because it's at a convention. They are fully renting it, and they can control time a little bit better because of that.
Hmm. Yeah,
uh
which is good.
yeah, and then Sunday is Top Cut. Um, so single elimination, top 32. They actually increased the time to 55 minutes on day two.
Which makes
Just,
sense.
I mean, it's single elimination, so yeah.
Well, yeah, single elation top like it's it's the top cut that I wish other tournaments had, basically. And it's been a while for me, but this is probably what I would attribute more to it, like a Magic GP. Um, of your your day one is you're like kind of hoping for a shot at day two, with most people not making it. But day two, like it really kind of cranks it up, and it's its own separate event, completely slate wipe clean. I guess except deck lists stay the same obviously, but um you at least come in fresh with a clean record, and you just have to win. And the extra time allotted with top cut rulings means that nobody's drawing out or stalling towards the top. They're only like someone will be declared the winner at the end of every round for each match.
Which is definitely a plus side, just because like people who play security control are notorious for stalling out games and forcing draws. So now this really puts some pressure on people playing those slower stally based decks. Although I think like looking at just some of the stuff coming down the line in BT11, we're probably not going to see a whole lot of like these stall based decks. It's not going to be hyper aggro either, just because that's not what Black Hawk Greymon is, and he's supposedly the best deck of the format. But that's a different story. And we're going to actually see like more Digimon at its finest in
Hmm.
that top cut.
Yeah, which is something that I look forward to at least watching, if not hopefully participating in. But that's to stretch, obviously, given the amount of people going and given the hyper competitiveness of the event. I will most likely, you know, generously, uh, you know, be watching from the sidelines at that point.
I mean, hopefully, ideally, we get into top 32, but one can only hope, right?
Yeah, like I made it to Nats. I'll do my best, and then I'm proud that I got there. So.
Yeah, and then there's gonna be some other side stuff at Nats. I'm pretty sure. They already announced like some Digimon art museum, and I'm blanking on the website. Um, but they're gonna be doing something special in person for everyone on top of whatever side events might be firing. Don't exactly know what that might be, but there's it looks like it's going to be a pretty fun event, a long one, especially on Saturday, but a pretty fun one at that. I don't
Mhm.
think there's anything else that's super spicy on the announcement. I'm just
No,
glossing over it.
BT11 was confirmed.
Oh yes, we are.
BT11 hard confirmed. Definitely will be BT11.
Yes. And speaking of BT11, I don't necessarily think that we're going to get any ban or restriction lists updates or what be it for nationals. Looking back at the previous history with the other nationals, that was in EX1. So it was an EX1 Nationals, and Ice Wall got hit after Nationals. So maybe we'll see a ban and restriction for after Nationals, but I'm going to take a hard guess, knocking on wood or whatever, that I'm right or wrong, depending on how you feel about the situation, that it is going to be full power BT11.
Um, I think an important caveat, because I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think it's more likely than, I guess it was last year that we still see some change because they haven't announced no change in their announcement. I mean, they didn't announce a change, but they also didn't announce a change. So, no news could mean no news, or no news could mean, wait. And this tournament is notably almost a month later than it was last year. So if last year's announcement came at the same time and was implemented at the same time, it would be live for this event because it's, a whole couple weeks later. So we still have maybe another 2 or 3, it's not a long time before they could potentially announce some sort of change to the ban restriction list. Uh, they seem to make them roughly every 6 months now, given the last two instances of that time period. So we are kind of due for one, but in all likelihood, we don't necessarily see one. And then Nationals just exists in its full, yeah, BT11 power, and then potentially something follows afterwards.
Yeah, and I think based on just a little bit of playtesting and practice with BT11, um, and looking at Japanese data, I don't know how the Japanese feel exactly about it, but just looking at the overabundance of Black or Greymon or Red Black Greymon as a whole, the core engine doesn't really seem to change that much between the decks in BT11 and what they're getting down the line. So I think like the biggest and most reasonable shakeup that they can do to try to limit the power of that deck specifically is hitting the Greymon X antibody card, just because, like I said before, when taking cards off and why cards were banned in the first place, at least in my interpretation of it, uh, it's about tempo. That card also just happens to add some really good protection on top of being one of the most tempo efficient level 4s that they could use to get into a fast and easy level 5 Digimon. And that seems to be like where the core crux turning point is for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if that card gets hit eventually. And same thing with Cool Boy, just tempo and advantage is the name of the game, and that card just does way too much. And the deck is staying around probably longer than they might want or anticipate. But when they give it like 3 sets of Greymon support, that's no surprise.
Mm. Yeah. Um. Yeah, there are a couple different directions they could go, but I think the big thing to know is that we do have a couple weeks left for them to announce something. I don't know exactly what they would announce or what they would hit, but uh, they have surprised us in the past. We didn't expect Cross Arts to get hit, and then it just suddenly was, and we were just living in a world where Cross Arts didn't define the meta anymore, and it could be true for Nationals as well.
Yeah, because this time last year was about when they announced their ban and restriction list. I'm literally looking at my YouTube right now when that announcement was made, and it was made on January 14th. So
Yeah,
that
we
was,
could get one next week.
yeah, we literally, if we're expecting one, it should be basically this month. So that way we're not blindsided with, oh, by the way, this is not viable in BT 11. Because I know some people are like doing preemptive testing like we are. But yeah, if we're going to hear something, it's going to be soon. If we don't hear anything, it's just going to be full power and we might get one later.
Mhm. So that being said, um, just why don't we take a minute to look at just the general scope? We could get into more specifics later as it gets closer, especially after there's a ban restriction announcement, potentially, or that like too close for there to be one. I don't want to, rant and rave about something that may or may not exist, but from like a top-down perspective, what is your total meta uh vision for BT11?
Well, uh, I hate to use Japanese data, but I've also been playtesting the deck myself, and right now, Black War Greymon just looks that strong. I don't see a reason why I would ever not play Black War Greymon other than the fact that I would be afraid of the mirror matches and just exhausted from playing mirrors, or just losing to that off Grandis or that off deck that just is able to deal with my Black War Greymon. But I think like against a lot of the spread against actual popular decks that people want to play, it does very good into almost every single one of them, especially any that's relying on tamers. Just the fact that Black War Greymon is still a big tamer hate deck just really limits the viability of any deck that's using any kind of tamer to gain advantage at all.
Hmm. Final results from Japan for those interested were that Black War Greymon was 3 times more popular than the second most deck, which is kind of not as bad as it seems, but in some ways it is because the second best deck was Cross 7, but the third best deck was Cross 4. So technically they're getting split along, a couple card choice lines defining them as separate archetypes, which they are rightfully so, but that basically puts Cross Hearts as a combined like 60-ish decks versus the 105, which is a lot closer than, 105 to 36. And but realistically, Black War Greymon was just that strong, and it really came out the gate really strong in Japan, so that um I think it even died down not necessarily because people found ways to beat it or because it started to lose, but because people were just mad at other people for playing it and they stopped playing it because it's entirely locals level information. If I played 3 weeks in a row and everyone's playing Black War Greymon, I just don't go to the fourth week.
Yeah. And like you said in previous episodes, it does get lonely at the top. Like, if you're going into Nats, you better be prepared to see and face a lot of Black War Greymon. Even just like North American buzz on Reddit, Facebook, Discord, what be it, a lot of people are thinking about bringing Black War Greymon. So maybe bringing a counter deck. Like Grandis would be a good idea, especially if you don't want to play it. That type of a meta call might actually end up working out for you. Although 11 rounds of not necessarily just all Black War Greymon means that if you end up seeing a pretty sour matchup, which could still happen, um, then you might just have goofed yourself, which I don't know. That's just the decision you're going to have to make. But yeah, Black War Greymon looks to be incredibly strong, um, which is why everyone wants it to be hit in some capacity.
So the rest of the choices that Japan used to try and counter Black War Greymon or play into Black War Greymon, uh, as I mentioned, less uh, frequent, less common. Uh, Everyone was basically playing Black War Greymon, and there were a couple of decks trying to play into Black War Greymon. I mean, there technically is a particular order here, but in really no particular order. Cross 7, then cross 4, uh, Grandis, uh, Minerva Loop. Technically,
Because
it's
it gets
not.
its other piece. I don't think it's that great, but
It completely fell apart in North America when its only prey got banned, and it was just way worse into Melga than it was into Cross Arts. But it saw a decent amount of play in Japan. Um, Even something like uh Ulforce saw a lot of play, a deck that is entirely based around Tamers that gets eaten alive by Melga or Blackrock Greymon.
I actually think like this didn't really show up in Japan results that much at all. Is Melga like Melga
Mm-hmm.
outside of Black War Greymon is still just decent into a lot of different matches in against BT11 decks. So like
Mm-hmm.
Melga still has some viability to stick around.
Yeah, if anything, I think the just the repetition of someone who's played Melga as long as it's been competitively viable has some value to it, even if they're no longer the favored matchup. Uh, it really depends upon what the actual matchup looks like for Melga into Black War Greymon, and most notably, Melga X doing something that it's probably not too familiar with and it's playing from behind.
Yeah, I initially did some testing against Melga versus Black War Greymon. And Black War Greymon is just kind of favored as long, caveat, as long as they get into their stack first and their stack is good enough. Which sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So it's not like it's a complete washout, but if they are able to set up good enough, they could just wall you out and stop you from doing much of anything, and then you just kind of lose from that point forward because you weren't able to aggress. But
Mm-hmm.
if you open the nuts and see all your pieces before they do, which Melga is a little bit more consistent than the Greymon engine just because of the extra draw power that blue generally has accompanied with it. Uh, it just it could be a pretty quick match if Melga does see its pieces.
Yeah, I if there's anything that I've learned about the last, year and a half of competitive Digimon, it's that you never count out blue. Every time you think blue's not going to be good, people bring it anyway. I mean, even looking at the last like couple metas where it's basically just been the Melga show and people that beat Melga sometimes, like Imperial German showed up. Like blue players play blue decks very well in North America, and if that says anything, it just means that I think if you bring a blue deck to nationals, um, you'll probably have a good shot.
I mean, part of it just comes down to Blue's like toolkit that it's been working with for a very long time. Like it is just one of the more consistent colors, and in this type of environment where consistency is literally king, um having the more consistent deck generally puts you at favor versus the opponents. Like Grandis is kind of just this ooh ah meme because green isn't super consistent as a color. It's gotten a little bit better thanks to the memory boost, but it's still not exactly quite there, especially since it also isn't utilizing X antibodies to its full capacity with Cool Boy and the option. I know some decks do run those types of cards, but some of them don't. But Blues just always had the best draw and some of the best tempo tools, and that really can make or break games very quickly and easily.
Mm. Yeah. Um, I think Blues Blues just been in a good spot for a long time, and as a result of that, even though it's probably not the most favored color or deck to bring to Nats, um, as I said, I do think uh people will do well and see success with blue decks, even though on paper they necessarily won't or shouldn't. Um, but in-person events change a lot of things too, and it's something that I think people will maybe undervalue a little bit is that you can be as calm, cool, and collected as you want, like in your sweatpants in your living room, but we have never had to fly across the country, sit in a stadium full of people that all qualified through various means, and look my opponent in the eyes, and people's level of just composition while they're playing, the decisions they make while playing, the how much sleep are they going to get the night before, what different varying degrees of jet lag are people going to have if you're flying from like myself all the way on the east coast, you're what, 4 hours behind for the day of, like that'll all matter. And coming down to it, I think how people different levels that people adjust will really determine who moves on to that day two, maybe more so than some of the like the silly stuff that we usually worry about.
Right, even just something as simple as food and water. Just oh, my opponent's doing their turn, or I beat them really quickly. Let me go get a glass of water from my fridge. Like that is definitely a different dynamic than what some people might be used to. Because I was in talks with my LGS, and not saying our Digimon scene isn't there. It's just really small compared to a lot of the other games that are being ran. The two other big games is One Piece and Yu-Gi-Oh. Yu-Gi-Oh being Yu-Gi-Oh, putting that aside, One Piece definitely as a newer card game has a bigger physical presence than it does a digital presence, where Digimon it's the inverse. We have a bigger digital presence than a physical presence. At least this is just how I feel based on my experience going to different LGSs and um, just looking at people's conversations about the game.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
people just might not be used to a more physical environment, and that definitely could have an influence on how their overall performance is.
yeah, it's definitely a factor, and I think the people that prepare better, the people like physically, mentally, the people that maybe have better birth for travel plans, like um I mean, I want to say I'm coming in like Thursday night, I think, because I'm gonna be there like a whole day just to exist, 4 hours in the past, but um just adjust to LA time, try and get a good night's sleep. I'm not gonna like going out partying the night before. I don't
No,
know
you
how
party
many.
day one after day one.
True, especially if you made it.
Oh my
If you
god,
made
if
it
you
to day
made it to
two.
day two, you are partying. I don't know how
Yep.
hard Digimon people party, but if Max Paris taught me anything, apparently they could party pretty hard.
Hangover cures are a must for day two, but because also everyone's like fucking 29. and there won't be any actual like people there that are under the age of 21 probably.
Not a lot, I would be guessing.
I mean, just based on like the average, peak popularity of the Digimon franchise versus like intersected with the amount of people that can afford to fly to LA and qualify for a Digimon tournament. Like that I feel like that intersection just by default makes you a little older.
I wouldn't say you're wrong. I know my YouTube statistics and what they tell me, and they tell me most people are around the age of like 25 and 30.
Mhm.
I think it's like
Yeah, that's what
25
I
and
would have guessed.
35. Yeah.
That's what I would have guessed. Yeah, it's like usually 10-year brackets on YouTube, but um so I don't know. I mean, depending upon how the next couple of weeks of testing go and depending upon what we actually get for a BT11 is like I said, like I'm still holding out some hope that there's some change just because I would rather play against a more diverse suite of decks, which is really the only thing that would come about of a change is fewer people feel that they have to play Black War Greymon. But um if I feel like I can't really come up with a hard counter to it, I don't even know if I could really convince myself to play it, even with the event that it is. And I might just take it as like a fun weekend and play something fun. See how far I can get with something weird. You know, say that I went like, what, 5 and 6 with like poop tribal or something like that.
I mean, somebody will definitely be making that video. It won't be me. I'll tell you that. But
Yeah.
cuz I would bring that type of a deck to locals. Um but I wouldn't bring that deck to like big competition. I think that deck has some very clear problems, but regardless, I totally get how you feel. I'm trying to think of myself like how do I handle the mirror, and am I okay with wanting to play the mirror to want to play Black War myself? Because right now, just based on some initial testing and data and just watching Japanese gameplay and all that stuff, trying to do my research and due diligence, it seems like the best way to be able to beat Black War Greymon X is literally either wait and pray for all of the protections to be removed. So the when digivolving effect of Metal Greymon X adds DP reduction protection and de-digivolve. So maybe taking advantage of the fact that it might not deal as much damage to pace yourself differently, that might be able to have a huge impact. Or just figure out ways to beat into it. So that's why everyone really was like, Grandis is going to be the next hotness because it's a good anti-meta card or like anti-meta deck against Black War Greymon because I'm just bigger than it. I hit over it and it has zero protection against what I'm doing, and then I just kill them and that's the game. But I do think like decks like Jesmon now are allowed to exist because of that same style of reasoning where it's like, oh, Jesmon, one of the key like draws to Jesmon is attacking into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon. So it's like, okay, now that Melga's out of the way, and Black War Greymon's perched up on that post, different decks that beat into it might be good. Which is why I think like Secret Tech Raid might be a sleeper hit, just because again, attacking into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon as long as you're bigger than it's basically like you're playing green but in red. So that might be pretty good and spicy that people might not be expecting, and that might give you a huge advantage. It's just trying to figure out and read the meta and determine what deck you want to play and what decks you're more likely to see.
Yeah. Um Overall, I'm still very excited for the event. I'm glad that I qualified and I hope I have fun and I hope it's worth it and I don't feel like I'm wasting my valuable limited vacation time from work to fly out to California to play in a Digimon tournament. But it's something that I know myself from last year, or plenty of other people in my local area would feel very privileged to have the opportunity to do so. So I also feel as though if I had, taken it for what it was and just said, well, I'm glad I qualified, but I'm not gonna, spend the money and fly out to California, then I probably also shouldn't have taken the nationals qualifier away from someone, in August when I won.
Yeah. And the I want to say the unfortunate thing, but it's just the nature of how product releases go. The set comes out literally 1 week before nationals. So, I don't know exactly your situation, but I know I'm getting a whole case. I know I'm picking it up. If my LGS is nice enough and I'm lucky enough, I might be able to get it a day or two early to start deck building. I like kind of ask them very nicely, like, hey, do you mind if I do this? And they're just like, we'll see what we can do. And I was just like, good enough for me. So, how are you going to be? Because I know you are a little bit more limited in what you generally buy and how you build decks. How are you approaching deck building for Nats?
I I'm actually not super concerned about it. Um, so the pre-release is the prior weekend, right?
Yeah. So if the set releases, let me get a calendar out. So if Nationals is the 24th, the set releases on the 17th. So pre-release is the 10th.
So I double checking because that feels close enough to where I feel like the signups for that already would have been out, but at the same time, I haven't
They're
gotten
not
any.
posted on the website. I remember
Yeah,
reading it earlier where
I
it's
haven't
just
gotten
like
any pings in my locals Discord. But uh, while I'm not like friends with a whole lot of people in my locals, just because I usually don't go as much as a lot of them do, um, we're all still friendly with each other, and I think for something like this, I really don't see any issue with me just basically going to my locals during pre-release, or if at the worst, like on release date, you know. Well, I guess that would be like the Thursday, right? I'm already maybe gonna be in Los Angeles by then, but um, some point between then, just picking up the product that I am gonna buy, um, and making any trades or like individual card purchases that need to happen at that point in time. Um, I don't really like having to buy cards on, release weekend at their singles value, but it makes a little bit more sense than gambling on just buying more product. So, unfortunately, that seems to be the route that I will have to go.
Uh, yeah. That's why I kind of just buy a case, just take all or as much RNG out of the equation as possible. The only like RNG that actually is kind of making me worrisome is the secrets, just because uh Rena is a secret rare, and uh
Well, first you
for the
need
all
four of
force
them.
deck you need four of them, and there have
Hmm.
been moments in my case where I haven't gotten a full playset of the secret rare, and I'm like actually freaking out and panicking. I know I did that in BT7 with Susanomon. I didn't get four Susanomon. I got three Susanomon, and I was like, oh crap.
Hmm.
Granted, it meant
Yeah.
a lot less back then than for something like Nationals, but even in my case scenario, it could still happen, um, which is
Yeah.
weird to me, but okay.
Hmm. Yeah, based on the decks that I'm like right now considering playing, not super concerned about it. I've already kind of keyed into the cards that I would need. And I mean, I could tell you right now, I'm not playing Galacticmon and I'm not playing Ulforce, so my concerns are significantly less than yours.
But Galacticmon, though, think of the protections. He just can't be removed. Although he is kind of hard to set up, though.
Yeah. So um thankfully I can basically have like 60 to 80% of my deck. Those numbers are completely made up. I have no idea. But um 60 to 80% of the deck built prior to BT11 and just slot in the new cards as needed and go on with my life.
I mean, because of the way I've been purchasing Digimon, I should be okay. If anything, I might be the guy to help other people.
Hmm. So, um, I know the news has been a little light recently, but thank everyone for sticking around listening. Uh, we've we've been trying to do our best to find things to talk about and find things that are interesting to talk about, and not just kind of put out a video just for the sake of or podcast for the sake of putting one out. So, if it means the content's a little light for a while we're kind of in the lull, it kind of is what it is. We'll come back as soon as the like competitive season, reaches its apex in the next couple of weeks before nationals, and then we have a couple weeks of like post nationals things that we plan on doing too.
Yeah. And I'm sure as we get closer to nationals, we'll get more information. I'm still curious on what kind of promos that are going to be the like entry and winning promo for the pre-release, and just how the pre-release is going to go in terms of that sealed environment, because each set literally has a different type of sealed environment, and
Imagine
I
playing
know
sealed environment in 2023.
uh, believe me, I don't enjoy it, but I seem to be good at it, so I'm just like whatever. I'll ride this tailcoat as long as I can. Um but it it's something people do generally look at in terms of like, oh, how I see the question pop up often enough, like what does the sealed environment look like? Um
Hmm.
but regardless, just the scramble to get the cards is going to be interesting on how it's going to affect the market and just everyone's perception and initial testing on where things are going to go. It's going to be more exciting the closer we get to nationals, is kind of just the gist of it.
I mean, now this is just my business sense thinking forward. If I were Core TGG and I had already gotten approved to host nationals in person for 1,000 or more people, when we go in Friday, I think just to confirm something. Like I don't remember exactly what's Friday for again, but
Friday is basically sign-ups. Let me
okay,
scroll
yeah,
back
you
down
just
to
like
the post.
you
I know
sign
it's
up
pretty
and then
much
you actually
sign-ups.
show up in person to say, well, I signed up and I'm here.
Yeah,
It's
so
the finalized list, and then Saturday morning you have to submit your deck list. But I bet, I bet my ass that they have like a
product out the butt.
ton of product.
Oh, you know they are. You
So
know they
you
are.
could probably, maybe not like super cheaply, but you could very reasonably expect it. If you got there maybe early enough on Friday, walk into the convention hall, sign up for the event, and buy a case, and they go back to your hotel room and build a deck.
Yeah, and I also know, not necessarily trying to advertise for PPG, but PPG is also going to be doing an event like the week before, where they're going to be giving you like a travel voucher and like booster boxes in order to help get you prepared for nationals, like literally the weekend before. So
Cool.
there's
That's
ways to
really cool
be.
of them.
Yeah. So there's ways to get yourself as prepared as you possibly can. Obviously, knowing what deck you want is going to be like the biggest and most important thing. And
And
just,
having it tested before you have to build it, because you won't have
yes.
time. Like, I mean, technically, like I could see some people if they're truly paper only players that only test decks once they've had it in their hands and they have a couple people they play with. I can see some people like picking up their like I don't know about you, but I pick up my product pre-release weekend because I don't buy it in large enough quantity that I have to wait later. So I get my like two, three, four boxes pre-release weekend, and then I build my decks, and I would have technically a full week of dedicated playtesting um, between pre-release weekend and nationals, if I so choose.
Speaking of pre-release, actually, and picking up product, then I might be able to weasel my LGS into trying to get a case for me then instead of at launch. So
Yeah.
thank you for
So,
reminding me on that one. Um,
yep. I mean, I'll be there. That's like, why not? So,
yeah,
that's all we have time for today. Thank you for sticking around to the end. It really helps us out, and I will see you